We're very good at articulating the end point. What we're not good at is saying how we're going to get from here to there. I think David gave us a framework. I'll definitely be studying that because I think that's what interests me. How do we get that change that we're looking for? And I take the point about being a change, but I think there's an element that we're not focusing on, and that's the political change management. And I think I've been asked by Idea to talk about why am I going to Rio. Well, that's it. I want to be that missing link between our vision and our values and the political change that we're seeking. Now, if you ask your average NGO worker to say, well, how do we bring about political change? What has to happen? And this is the answer. We always end up blaming a lack of political will. If you look at what political will is built out of or made up of, it's about the rules of the games under which politicians have to focus. It's the value systems that they're driven by. It's a whole complex world, and we have to get better at speaking to that. Political change comes about because there's political support. There is a vision. The other circle that half overlaps is that we need to make a case for change. The third bubble tends to be absent from our discourse, and that's the political opportunity. Every change needs a crisis point. You need to unfreeze the current status quo in order to break open the possibilities and to bring about new opportunities. What hook have we got in the political system, given the constraints in which our politicians work? So I'm going to go to Rio and see if I can be a little bit helpful in that, because I think that's really what we need.
The reality is that governments are not going to achieve the commitments they have set themselves, and there's a lack of frank and honest debate with the public on this issue. So that's a key challenge. A second challenge I would highlight is that it's really critical to ensure that action to address climate change is not going to further exacerbate poverty and inequity within domestic constituencies, but also obviously at the global level. And the predominant worldview, as we all well know, accepts the fact that there is massive poverty and massive inequity globally. So what do we need to do to be able to shift to that worldview that's going to inform the response to climate change? We must prevent the response to climate change becoming as much a threat to poor and vulnerable people as climate change itself. The quest to change our energy sources is exacerbating the competition between land for food, for energy, etc. We're seeing land grabbing, we're seeing hydropower mega projects to ensure water security. All of these things are having impacts on people's ability to access land, water, their ability to produce food. The last challenge, I would say, how can we build the bridge between personal conviction and commitment, or community conviction and commitment to political change? We need to enable people to be able to see themselves not just as individual actors, but as having a political voice, and be able to speak as an individual and as a community to really call for the changes we need as a society. Thanks.
Okay. I wonder sometimes whether or not we're actually accepting responsibility for our role in climate change. I'm still not sure whether or not there's a huge element of denial within our societies. And really looking at our own behaviour, and I think development education can do an awful lot about that, but I still think there's a huge task in front of us in accepting the fact that a lot of our behaviours are leading to an awful lot of damage, not just here, but in an overseas context as well. One of the things I think that is a little bit of an issue as well is maybe a little bit of a lack of understanding, and this I think permeates Irish society in general, not so much necessarily just in relation to climate justice, but interconnectedness, interdependence. And from a governance point of view to our education system, governance and politics, I think development sectors in general avoid the whole political question. I think we need to be much more political in our activities. I wonder about some of our southern partners in development perspectives. We've got a whole range of partners from the global south who do, I think, in many ways a far more sustainable and effective job. Partially, I think, because they can't rely on funding. They have to be much more sustainable. And then lastly, I suppose, how can the development education sector enable these changes to take place? I think once again, if we had an understanding of what development education is, I think we would realise the huge weapon that we have in our armoury of tackling climate justice, if only there was the investment in development education. And that's not necessarily just from a governance point of view or in a political point of view, but I'm also challenging the development sector in general. I don't think that there's enough of a realisation within the development sector of what development education is and what it can bring to the table in tackling the whole range of development issues that face our planet. And when you look at, I suppose, in a numerical sense, the amount that's invested in development education, to be quite honest, I think it verges on pitiful. So when you look at problem solving, critical thinking, systems thinking, development education, good development education does a lot of that. Behaviour change, bringing people from not just knowledge about impact, but moving on to behaviour change. Good development education, I think, does that.
I'm going to look at the idea of what are we doing in education, specifically in primary education and in initial teacher education, and then what else could we do, what are the challenges. The research that we've done, it's unbelievable what's going on in Irish primary schools. Over 90% of schools are taking part in climate change activities through the curriculum and through green schools and through other initiatives, their involvements in transition towns and so on. So teachers do appear to be trying to demonstrate the interconnectedness, the interdependence and so on. For example, there's been a very significant change in how children learn geography in primary schools. When I first came to Ireland, I was amazed at how many children were learning about so many different countries in the world, but they were skimming the surface. But now children tend to look deeper at different countries and have more of a focus on people and their lives. But there is a lot more that can be done, and our research shows a number of things really. That first of all, it's okay to teach children about complex ideas. They're well able to take them on board depending on how it's presented. It's about community action rather than just individual people, and that's come up lots today, and how schools and communities are connected. And in some places they are. Some schools and some communities do this very well. In other places it isn't done so well. The curriculum gives us that opportunity. It's one of the stated objectives in the primary curriculum for geography and SPHE about how children can work within local communities. So there's countless examples of this. But in Ireland, I think we're still good at tokenism, the pictures of the children in the paper, and I always feel a bit sad, and I always think that children are capable of so much more. In fact, yesterday I had children writing definitions of geography. It's a study I did 10 years ago. Their ideas of geography have changed, thank goodness. In some classrooms, not in all classrooms. I'm actually going back to the same schools I did this 10 years ago. And one of the children up in Ballyboden drew his perfect geography lesson, and his picture of a perfect geography lesson was to go to the local river and to clean it up. So children have powerful wishes and ideas of how to participate. The political priorities in education, and we're facing a time when, quite rightly, numeracy and literacy are being prioritised, and that can make other things seem less important. But I suppose if you think about what children can do and how we can educate to produce children that are active citizens now and in the future, then what I describe here, I suppose, can enhance all of this. And I think about yesterday when I was in a classroom and the children were doing a lot of geography and history and science through investigation, through using their locality and so on, and what impact that was having on those children as they grew up through the school, and also in how they could communicate with people, how they could present what they had found out as well. So that just gives you a bit of an overview about what's going on in primary education. Thank you.